Today's hearing will examine the federal government's effort to address contamination from polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, and identify potential solutions to build a more comprehensive approach to conduct research, assess the risk, and ultimately effectively remediate the contaminated sites that we have here in Michigan as well as all across the country. PFAS are man-made chemicals that are widely used in industry and consumer products due to their ability to repel water, oil, and heat. Known as forever chemicals because they do not break down naturally, these substances are used in everything from commercial products like food packaging, nonstick cookware, stain-resistant carpet, and waterproof clothing, as well as firefighting foams. Despite the prevalence, the well-known health effects, PFAS are not currently regulated by the federal government. For the last 80 years, they have been allowed to seep into our air, our soil, and even our drinking water. Prolonged exposure to these toxic chemicals can lead to serious health effects like cancer, liver and kidney issues, and reproductive and developmental issues. In Michigan, we have the highest amount of recorded PFAS contamination sites in the entire country, largely because Michigan is on the forefront of identifying these locations and actually looking for them. We know when you look for them, you will find them all over the country as well, not just here in Michigan. But these chemicals continue to pose significant risk to our communities, and as of now, more than 2 million Michigan residents have been exposed to toxic chemicals in their drinking water. In particular, service members, first responders and their families, and residents of communities surrounding military sites across Michigan have continued to face sustained exposure to PFAS. These folks, many of them who serve our country with honor and distinction, deserve a whole lot better. And that is why, as chair of the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee, I've pushed for federal agencies responsible for PFAS contamination to take a more proactive approach to addressing what is indeed a crisis. In September 2018, I convened the Senate's first hearing on PFAS contamination to examine the federal role in addressing this crisis, as well as a field summit in Grand Rapids to hear directly from Michiganders about the impact PFAS contamination has had on their lives. Most recently, last December, I convened a hearing to examine the Department of Defense Inspector General report that showed that the Department of Defense continued to use these chemicals despite knowing the harmful effects. Since these hearings, my colleagues and I have passed bipartisan infrastructure law, which invests in clean drinking water and includes dedicated funding to address the PFAS contamination, and secured provisions in the 2019 National Defense Bill that bans the Department of Defense from purchasing firefighting foams containing PFAS chemicals. I'm also pleased to see the administration has taken important steps to address this crisis with the EPA's PFAS strategic roadmap and new drinking water health advisories for PFAS, significantly lowering the lifetime drinking water health advisories for PFOA and PFAS, and setting a new advisory level for Gen X chemicals. However, Michiganders are unfortunately continuing to suffer the consequences of exposure to these hazardous chemicals, and government must do more to protect these communities. I'm going to continue pushing federal agencies that are responsible for PFAS contamination to take additional steps to help the communities that have been impacted by these. I'm also working to pass legislation that I introduced earlier this year to prevent PFAS contamination in our communities, including my Preventing PFAS Runoff at Airports Act, which incentivizes commercial airports nationwide to purchase testing equipment that avoids spreading PFAS chemicals, and my Federal PFAS Research Evaluation Act, which will give us a more complete understanding of the impact of PFAS and the impact it has on our health and environment so that we can more effectively deal with this contamination. I also plan to introduce new legislation in the coming weeks to improve intergovernmental coordination for PFAS contamination and facilitate a more comprehensive approach to cleaning up existing sites as well as preventing future contamination. So today, our first panel will feature federal officials who can speak about their agency's efforts on PFAS contamination and discuss strategic action plans, as well as additional opportunities to improve the coordination for every aspect of PFAS response, ranging from research to remediation. Our second panel will feature Michiganders who have lived this crisis firsthand. And I certainly look forward to hearing their perspectives and insights on how we keep our friends, our families, and our loved ones out of harm's way. I appreciate all of our witnesses for taking time to be here today and share more about the work that they have undertaken to address the PFAS exposure and to join in this, what will be a very productive conversation on what more we must do to protect our communities and our harmful chemicals.